The Vakral were an ancient species, defined by their cold, calculating logic. Their culture had evolved far beyond what they considered the inefficiencies of emotion. For millennia, they had perfected their methods of analysis, reducing every phenomenon they encountered into data, patterns, and probabilities. This efficiency had made them dominant in their corner of the galaxy, but it also left them with a deep void, a lack of curiosity about anything that didn't fit their rigid frameworks. It was on one such mission of observation that their focus turned to a planet they'd mostly ignored, Earth. Its inhabitants were neither the most advanced nor the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Humans, to the Vakral, were unremarkable average intelligence, rudimentary technology, and a penchant for chaos. But there was something oddly compelling about these beings that demanded further scrutiny. The first observation logs focused on human interactions with one another. Their chaotic emotional displays, their inefficiencies in problem-solving when sentiment got involved, their constant chatter filled with what seemed like trivialities. It was all so alien to the Vakral. Yet, among all the curious behaviors the humans exhibited, one pattern emerged that left the Vakral both perplexed and oddly intrigued. Humans, it seemed, had a bizarre fixation on touching and interacting with creatures from their world. This wasn't for dominance or utility. No, this interaction appeared rooted in something far stranger, affection. Vakral analysts reviewed hundreds of transmissions of humans interacting with a variety of Earth creatures, from furry mammals to scaly reptiles, and even creatures that appeared entirely defenseless. What baffled the observers the most was the sheer diversity of species humans seemed to pet. The first recorded example was a human crouched on a sidewalk, hand outstretched to a stray feline. The creature, cautious at first, eventually drew closer, allowing the human to stroke its back. The feline responded with a peculiar vibration that the humans called purring. The Vakral immediately categorized this as a form of mutual manipulation. Surely the human gained some advantage, perhaps extracting data through tactile sensors, or maybe inducing compliance through chemical signals. But their analysis showed nothing. It was simply an act of connection. As they dove deeper into their study, the aliens found similar instances with creatures vastly different from the feline. Humans petted massive canines, whose sheer strength and predatory instincts should have rendered the interaction dangerous. Yet these creatures seemed tamed by the mere touch of human hands. Birds, reptiles, even amphibians. None seemed immune to the strange power of human contact. For a species as logical as the Vakral, this defied explanation. Are they manipulating these creatures through invisible means? One analyst questioned. Perhaps pheromones? Their simulations ruled out all known biological mechanisms. It wasn't manipulation, at least not in any way the Vakral understood. This made the behavior even more baffling. If there was no tangible benefit, why would a species waste time petting animals? The confusion deepened as they observed more intricate behaviors. A human, finding a wounded bird, cupped it gently in their hands and murmured softly. Despite the bird's clear injuries and terror, it slowly relaxed, as if soothed by the human's voice and touch. The Vakral couldn't understand. To them, a wounded creature was a liability, an obstacle to be removed. But here were humans, extending their efforts and emotions for seemingly no logical gain. When the Vakral reviewed recordings of humans interacting with creatures they couldn't domesticate, lions, sharks, or even venomous snakes, they were left speechless. These creatures, apex predators in their ecosystems, should have been enemies. Yet humans found ways to interact with them peacefully, often with nothing more than patience and a gentle touch. The alien observers, though unable to feel emotions themselves, began to develop something approximating awe. What sort of species would willingly approach danger, not to subdue it, but to connect with it? One instance, in particular, stood out to the observers. A human scuba diver approached a massive stingray. The creature, easily capable of defending itself lethally, swam close as the human extended a hand. The diver's touch was light, deliberate. The stingray lingered, seeming almost to enjoy the interaction before gliding away. The Vakral replayed the scene over and over, trying to understand what had occurred. Every time, they reached the same conclusion. Humans possessed a trait that allowed them to bridge the gap between species in ways no other life form could. As days turned into weeks, the Vakral observation team began cataloging these interactions with growing fascination. But fascination turned into alarm when they encountered footage of humans interacting with creatures considered aggressive even by galactic standards. A clip showed a human approaching a creature native to their forests, a wolf. This animal had all the markers of a predator: sharp teeth, primal instincts, and a pack mentality that prioritized its own kind. Yet the human knelt, extending its hand, palm up. Slowly, the wolf approached, sniffed, and allowed itself to be petted. The human even scratched its ears, eliciting a look of what the observers could only describe as contentment. "This is illogical," one Vakral scientist finally said. "It defies every survival mechanism we know." "It's more than illogical," another replied. "It's dangerous. And yet, it works." This growing realization led the Vakral to shift their perspective. Initially, they had thought of humans as inefficient, driven by emotions and unnecessary bonds. But now they wondered if these traits were not weaknesses, but strengths. Humanity's ability to connect with creatures so unlike themselves hinted at an adaptability the Vakral could neither replicate nor fully understand. The final piece of evidence that cemented the Vakral's newfound respect for humans came from a video recorded at an Earth marine facility. A trainer entered a pool containing a killer whale, a creature the Vakral recognized as a highly intelligent predator. The human swam alongside it, touching its dorsal fin and guiding it through what seemed like complex maneuvers. The creature followed the human's cues not out of fear or force, but willingly, responding to a bond built on trust. The Vakral were stunned. It wasn't just that humans could pet anything, they could form meaningful connections with creatures that should have no reason to trust them. It was a power unlike anything the Vakral had encountered in their millennia of exploration. And for the first time in their history, they didn't just want to observe. They wanted to understand. The Vakral Council deliberated over the findings with a gravity usually reserved for matters of galactic survival. The implications of what their observers had discovered about humans were impossible to ignore. What seemed trivial at first, a mere quirk of a primitive species, now appeared to hint at a profound evolutionary advantage. This ability to form connections with such a wide variety of life forms raised questions about the very nature of dominance and survival in the galaxy. For the Vakral, understanding a new species typically followed a structured process. Observe, analyze, classify, and adapt the findings to their own purposes. But with humans, the usual methodologies yielded no satisfying answers. Their capacity to bridge the divide between species was not a product of superior technology or biological manipulation. It was rooted in something intangible. To the Vakral, who prided themselves on reducing all things to logic, this was deeply unsettling. A decision was made to take the study further. The Vakral would initiate direct contact, not with governments or militaries, but with individuals, those who demonstrated this peculiar behavior most strongly. The objective was not conquest or diplomacy, but to extract and dissect the essence of this human trait. Was it biological, psychological, or something else entirely? The first human they selected was a biologist living in a remote rainforest. This individual spent their days rehabilitating injured animals, from jaguars to monkeys, often risking their own safety in the process. Vakral operatives observed from their cloaked vessel as the human worked tirelessly, displaying no fear even when faced with creatures capable of inflicting fatal harm. One incident stood out in particular. A wounded eagle, its talons sharp enough to shred flesh, allowed the human to clean its wound and bandage its wing. The bird's initial resistance gave way to calm, almost as if it understood the human's intentions. The Vakral struggled to interpret this. Their models suggested that the eagle should have fought or fled, yet neither occurred. The human's actions seemed to bypass the bird's natural instincts, establishing a connection that defied explanation. This wasn't dominance or coercion, it was something entirely different. The council theorized that humans might emit subtle signals, perhaps electromagnetic or pheromonal, to calm other species. However, repeated scans showed no evidence of such mechanisms. The mystery deepened. The next phase involved indirect communication. The Vakral began planting objects in the human's environment, small artifacts designed to subtly influence behavior or elicit specific reactions. One such artifact emitted a frequency meant to agitate animals, simulating a natural predator's presence. To their astonishment, the humans' response was not panic but compassion. They immediately began comforting the distressed animals, speaking in soft tones and using touch to calm them. The frequency failed to disrupt the human-animal bond. If anything, it seemed to strengthen it. This left the Vakral with only one conclusion. The human's ability to connect was neither purely instinctual nor environmental. It was deeply ingrained, a core aspect of their identity as a species. The council debated whether this trait could be replicated or artificially induced in other life forms. If the Vakral could harness such a capacity, it could redefine their approach to diplomacy, resource acquisition, and even conflict resolution. But replication proved impossible. Attempts to mimic the human trait using synthetic surrogates failed spectacularly. When a Vakral automaton approached a canine, the animal growled and retreated. Despite being programmed with advanced algorithms to simulate human behavior, the surrogate lacked the ineffable quality that humans seem to exude. Whatever this connection was, it could not be reduced to mere programming or mimicry. Their frustration grew. For a species that thrived on understanding and mastering the unknown, this failure was unacceptable. Yet, even in their frustration, the Vakral could not deny their growing admiration for humanity. This seemingly chaotic, inefficient species had unlocked something the Vakral had long abandoned: the power of connection not for control, but for mutual understanding. A breakthrough occurred when the Vakral decided to observe not just the humans who interacted with animals but also those who connected deeply with each other. They studied caregivers, teachers, and even those in conflict zones who risked their lives to protect others. The patterns were clear. The same instincts that drove humans to comfort and bond with animals extended to their interactions with one another. It wasn't limited by species. It was a universal impulse to bridge divides. One case stood out: a human soldier in a war-torn region who paused in the middle of a battle to rescue a stray dog trapped in rubble. This act of selflessness made no tactical sense. The soldier gained no strategic advantage, and the risk to their own life was immense. Yet they persisted, freeing the dog and carrying it to safety. The Vakral replayed this footage endlessly, dissecting every frame. They could not comprehend why a species would prioritize the life of another over their own survival, especially when the other life was of no apparent utility. This act resonated deeply with the Vakral Council. For a species that had evolved beyond emotional attachments, this kind of behavior was both incomprehensible and awe-inspiring. It forced them to confront the limitations of their own logic-driven existence. Perhaps there was more to survival than efficiency. Perhaps there was strength in the very chaos they had long dismissed. The Vakral's growing fascination with humanity led to an unprecedented decision: to initiate direct contact, not as conquerors or observers, but as students. They would approach humans not to study them as specimens but to learn from them. For a species as proud as the Vakral, this was an act of immense humility. But it was also a recognition of something they could no longer ignore. Humanity had unlocked a form of strength that transcended technology, biology, or strategy. It was a strength rooted in connection, in the ability to reach across divides and find common ground. As the Council prepared for this monumental step, they could not help but wonder: if humanity's greatest strength lay in its ability to connect, what other secrets might this unassuming species hold? The Vakral had spent millennia mastering the physical and intellectual domains of existence. Now they were poised to explore a new frontier, guided by the very species they had once dismissed as ordinary. The Vakral did not approach with grand ships or overwhelming displays of power. Instead, they sent a lone envoy to Earth, carefully selecting a rural community far from the influence of politics or media. Their goal was simple: to understand humanity at its most unfiltered. The envoy, a being of sleek design and advanced intelligence, assumed a humanoid form to minimize alarm. Even so, its presence immediately drew the attention of the locals. The first human to interact with the envoy was an elderly farmer. He approached cautiously, unsure of what he was seeing but curious nonetheless. To the envoy's surprise, the man offered no hostility or fear. Instead, he extended a hand, as if to welcome a stranger into his home. It was a gesture that defied logic. Why would a being unarmed and alone trust something so alien? The envoy hesitated before mimicking the gesture, its artificial hand meeting the human's in an act of mutual acknowledgement. The farmer, seemingly unperturbed, introduced the envoy to his animals. There were cows, chickens, and a dog named Daisy. The envoy observed as the farmer spoke to each creature with familiarity, treating them not as possessions but as companions. Daisy, in particular, seemed to sense something unique about the visitor. She approached cautiously, sniffed the envoy's hand, and then wagged her tail. The Vakral envoy noted this interaction carefully. The dog's acceptance seemed to validate what the council had observed from afar. Humans had an unparalleled ability to communicate trust across species. Over the following days, the envoy became a fixture in the community. It followed the farmer as he went about his daily tasks, observing his interactions not only with his animals but also with his neighbors. The envoy noticed patterns in their behavior. The way they greeted each other with warmth, shared resources without hesitation, and gathered in the evenings to exchange stories. This was not a society driven solely by logic or efficiency. It was something far more complex, an intricate web of relationships that bound the community together. The envoy attempted to replicate these behaviors. It greeted the humans with their customary handshakes, tried to mimic their speech patterns, and even attempted to assist with farm chores. While its actions were met with good-natured laughter, the humans seemed to appreciate the effort. They welcomed the envoy into their lives as if it were just another neighbor. For the Vakral, this was a revelation. The humans' openness extended not just to animals but to all beings, regardless of origin. One evening, during a community gathering, the envoy observed a particularly striking moment. A child had fallen and scraped her knee. As she cried, her mother knelt beside her, speaking softly and wiping away her tears. The envoy noted the physiological changes in both the child and the mother: elevated heart rates, hormonal fluctuations, and yet, an overwhelming sense of calm that seemed to envelop them both. The child's cries subsided, replaced by laughter as her mother comforted her. This, the envoy realized, was the essence of humanity's strength. Their connections were not transactional but deeply emotional, rooted in a shared vulnerability that created bonds stronger than any physical force. The envoy decided to test this theory further. It presented the community with a fabricated crisis, a malfunctioning piece of its own technology designed to emit a distress signal. The humans responded immediately, not with suspicion but with concern. They gathered around the envoy, offering tools, advice, and assistance. Even the children pitched in, their curiosity overriding any fear they might have felt. Within hours, the problem was resolved, and the humans celebrated as if they had accomplished something monumental. For the envoy, this was a pivotal moment. The humans' willingness to collaborate, even with an alien being, underscored their unique ability to forge connections that transcended barriers. The Vakral Council, monitoring these interactions from afar, was astounded. They had expected resistance, perhaps even hostility. Instead, they witnessed a level of acceptance and cooperation that defied all their projections. The envoy reported back with detailed observations, highlighting the human's capacity for empathy, adaptability, and trust. These traits, it argued, were not merely evolutionary quirks but a profound strength that had allowed humanity to thrive in ways the Vakral could scarcely comprehend. But the envoy's most startling discovery came when it observed the human's relationship with the natural world. Unlike the Vakral, who had long since abandoned their homeworld in favor of artificial habitats, humans maintained a deep connection to their environment. They spoke of the land with reverence, treating it not as a resource to be exploited but as a partner in their survival. The farmer, for instance, spoke of his crops and livestock as if they were extensions of himself. This symbiotic relationship, the envoy realized, was another cornerstone of humanity's resilience. The council deliberated over the envoy's findings. Some argued that humanity's traits were irrelevant mere curiosities in a galaxy dominated by power and technology. Others saw the potential for something far greater. If the Vakral could learn to emulate even a fraction of humanity's capacity for connection, it could revolutionize their society. The envoy, for its part, urged the council to reconsider their approach. Humanity was not a species to be studied from a distance or manipulated for gain. They were, instead, a beacon of what the galaxy could aspire to become. The decision was made to continue the experiment, expanding it to include other human communities and even inviting select humans to visit the Vakral homeworld. This was no longer merely an observation but the beginning of a partnership. The Vakral had come to Earth seeking answers, and they found something far more valuable. A new perspective on what it meant to thrive, not as individuals or empires but as a collective bound by trust, empathy, and a shared purpose. The Vakral's experiment shifted from passive observation to active collaboration. Humans, now aware of their alien visitors, responded with characteristic curiosity and enthusiasm. Rather than treating the Vakral with fear or suspicion, they welcomed them into their lives as they would any new neighbor. This approach baffled and intrigued the Vakral further, who had long been accustomed to species valuing isolation or guarded diplomacy. The envoy returned to the council with a new proposal: immerse themselves fully into human society, not merely as observers but as participants. This was unprecedented. For a species as advanced as the Vakral, to adopt the customs and practices of a less technologically developed civilization seemed counterintuitive. Yet, it was becoming clear that humanity's strength lay in precisely those practices the Vakral had dismissed as primitive. A new wave of Vakral envoys was sent, embedded within diverse human communities across the globe. In rural villages, they learned the value of cooperation and shared labor. In bustling cities, they observed the complexities of human innovation and the way millions could coexist, often in chaotic harmony. They even participated in cultural traditions, from festivals to family gatherings, experiencing firsthand the richness of human life. The breakthroughs weren't one-sided. Humans, too, gained insights from the Vakral. Advanced knowledge in energy, medicine, and environmental sustainability was shared in carefully measured doses. Yet, the humans often took these technologies and adapted them in ways the Vakral hadn't anticipated. Where the Vakral saw tools, humans saw opportunities for creativity and collaboration. This exchange, more than anything else, highlighted the unique potential of their partnership. One particularly transformative moment occurred when a Vakral envoy attended a human scientific conference. The event wasn't about showcasing dominance or achievements, but rather about sharing ideas and fostering dialogue. The envoy presented its findings on humanity, not as a report but as an open conversation. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with human scientists eagerly asking questions and offering their own interpretations. The Vakral envoy was struck by how the humans didn't seek to compete or criticize but to understand and improve together. The Vakral Council began to recognize that humanity's approach to problem-solving, rooted in diversity of thought and collective effort, was something their own society had long neglected. The Vakral were efficient, yes, but their efficiency often came at the cost of creativity and adaptability. Humanity, with all its flaws and contradictions, thrived because it embraced imperfection as an opportunity for growth. The turning point came when the Vakral proposed a joint project, a mission to restore a dying world on the fringes of their galaxy. The planet, ravaged by centuries of neglect, was seen as a lost cause by the Vakral. But the humans, true to form, saw it differently. They approached the challenge not with resignation but with determination, pooling their knowledge and resources with the Vakral in a way that was both pragmatic and hopeful. As the project progressed, the Vakral witnessed something extraordinary. The humans didn't just focus on restoring the planet's ecosystems. They also considered the emotional and cultural aspects of the endeavor. They planted not only crops but also trees that held symbolic meaning, built structures that encouraged community gatherings, and even composed music to celebrate the planet's rebirth. For the Vakral, this was a revelation. Restoration wasn't merely about functionality. It was about creating a space where life could thrive in all its forms. When the planet began to show signs of recovery, it wasn't hailed as a victory for one species, but as a triumph of collaboration. The humans and Vakral celebrated together, not as separate entities but as partners united by a shared vision. The success of the mission became a symbol of what could be achieved when two very different civilizations worked together. Back on Earth, the relationship between humans and the Vakral deepened. Cultural exchanges became commonplace, with humans visiting the Vakral homeworld and vice versa. These interactions weren't always seamless. There were misunderstandings and challenges, but they were always approached with the same spirit of curiosity and respect that had defined their initial encounters. The Vakral Council, once skeptical of humanity's value, now viewed them as indispensable allies. Humanity's unique traits, its empathy, adaptability, and unyielding optimism, had proven to be not just a curiosity but a vital asset. The Vakral began to incorporate these qualities into their own society, fostering a culture that valued collaboration and creativity alongside their existing strengths. For humanity, the partnership offered a new sense of purpose. The knowledge that they were no longer alone in the universe, and that their unique qualities could contribute to something greater, ignited a wave of innovation and introspection. They began to see themselves not just as inhabitants of Earth but as participants in a broader galactic community. The story of humanity and the Vakral became a legend, told not as a tale of conquest or domination but as a testament to the power of connection. It was a reminder that even in a galaxy filled with advanced civilizations, the greatest strength lay not in technology or power but in the simple, profound act of reaching out and saying, "We can do this together."